Hi everyone, my name is Nikos Panagiotou. I am Associate Professor at School of Journalism and Mass Media Communications, Aristotle University, and Head of Digital Communication Network Global. And together with Vlad.
Hi, Nikos. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you, at least virtually. To be in Greece, it's great. It's great for us. I'm in Washington D.C. I'm a program manager with Global Networks with an NGO called World Learning here in Washington. Glad to be with you.
Thank you, Vlad, for accepting the invitation to moderate this very interesting panel under the title Fake News, Disinformation, Misinformation, What's at Stake? In order to approach this issue, we have with us distinguished guests, and the first speaker will be Dimitris Alikakos, which is a fact-checker working at Ellinika Hoaxes, a very well-known Greek fact-checking organization and third-party member with Facebook. Vlad?
Other speakers we have with us today are Mounir Ibrahim. He's an experienced former foreign service officer with a broad field experience on several continents. So it's very interesting what his experience with disinformation is. He's currently Vice President of Strategic Initiative at Truepic, an award-winning technology company specializing in image authenticity and provenance. We also have with us Nina Jankowicz, who is Disinformation Fellow at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., and the author of a book called How to Lose the Information War, Russia, Fake News, and the Future of Conflict.
And together with us is Professor Christos Frangonikolopoulos, a colleague of mine at School of Journalism and Mass Media Communications at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. Christos Frangonikolopoulos is a Jean Monnet chair holder. He has been awarded twice this distinction, one regarding European integration journalism and the other one about European public diplomacy. His work is distinguished, and it is regarding issues about European integration journalism, international relations, as well as peace journalism. We will start our panel, and the first speaker will be Dimitris Alikakos. Dimitris, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us.
Κύριε Παναγιώτου, ευχαριστώ για την πρόσκληση. Καλησπέρα σε όλους σας. Εργάζομαι ως αρχισυντάκτη σε μία από τις 120 περίπου πιστοποιημένες ομάδες ελέγχου γεγονότων που λειτουργούν παγκοσμίως. Η δουλειά μας είναι ο έλεγχος της πληροφορίας που κινείται στο διαδίκτυο αναφορικά με την αξιοπιστία της. Τα τελευταία 2 χρόνια είμαστε συνεργάτες του Facebook στην αντιμετώπιση της παραπληροφόρησης. Επιτρέψτε μου να ξεκινήσω ανάποδα. Θα πάω μερικά χρόνια πίσω. Στις αρχές της περασμένης δεκαετίας η Ελλάδα μπήκε στη δίνη μιας μεγάλης οικονομικής κρίσης. Τα αποτελέσματα τα γνωρίζουμε εμείς οι Έλληνες. Φόβος, ανασφάλεια, ανεργία, οικονομική ύφεση. Λίγο αργότερα και ταυτόχρονα με την οικονομική κρίση ήρθαμε αντιμέτωποι με μια άλλη κρίση που εξελίχθηκε σε δράμα αλλά και τραγωδία για χιλιάδες ανθρώπους. Μιλάω για το προσφυγικό μεταναστευτικό πρόβλημα. Η ελληνική κοινωνία την ίδια στιγμή που προσπαθούσε να συνέλθει από το σοκ της κρίσης βίωνε την πρόκληση της διαχείρισης ενός τεράστιου προβλήματος. Μέσα σε αυτό το πλαίσιο, που το παρουσιάζω βέβαια συνοπτικά λόγω χρόνου, γιγαντώθηκε ένα κίνημα θυμού και στήρας άρνησης. Στην πράξη το είδαμε με την άνοδο της ακροδεξιάς αλλά και άλλων πολιτικών σχημάτων με κύριους άξονες στη ρητορική του, στο λαϊκισμό, την ξενοφοβία και έναν αντιευρωπαϊσμό άλλοτε φανερό και δυναμικό και άλλοτε και καλυμμένο. Μέσα σε αυτό το περιβάλλον, άκρος τοξικό όπως καταλαβαίνετε, ήταν αναμενόμενο να βρουν πρόσφορο έδαφος για αναπαραγωγή τα fake news και οι θεωρίες συνωμοσίας. Πάντα έτσι συμβαίνει. Ήταν εκείνη τη στιγμή που η πλατφόρμα, το Facebook, κατανόησε έστω και αργά ότι μια μικρή χώρα αντιμετωπίζει σοβαρό πρόβλημα και αποφάσισε να την εντάξει στο πρόγραμμα ελέγχου γεγονότων. Η πρόκληση για μας ήταν μεγάλη. Οι κανόνες ελέγχου του Facebook προς τα ΜΜΕ ήταν αυστηροί και βέβαια η δική μας ευθύνη να αντεπεξέλθουμε σε αυτό το νέο ρόλο τεράστια. Τόσο το 2018 όσο και το 2019 το μεγαλύτερο πρόβλημα αναφορικά με την παραπληροφόρηση ήταν το προσφυγικό μεταναστευτικό. Fake news σε συνδυασμό με ρητορική μίσους. Δώσαμε μια δύσκολη μάχη που κανείς δεν μπορεί να πει ότι κερδίθηκε. δεν ητάται εύκολα το τέρας της παραπληροφόρησης. Ωστόσο, περιορίσαμε όσο μπορούσαμε το φαινόμενο. Και φτάνουμε στο 2020. Η τραγωδία της πανδημίας μας βρήκε όλους απροετοίμαστους. Κυβερνήσεις, θεσμούς, την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, ακόμα και τους οργανισμούς υγείας. Και βέβαια, τις εταιρείες κολοσσούς των κοινωνικών δικτύων. Ο νέος εχθρός αυτή τη φορά ήταν άγνωστος. Αυτή αποδείχτηκε η μεγαλύτερη δύναμή του, πέρα βέβαια από τις επιπτώσεις στην ανθρώπινη υγεία. Τι ακριβώς κάνει ο ιός, ποια όργανα προσβάλλει και πώς βοηθάει η μάσκα στον περιορισμό της μετάδοσης, τι γίνεται με τα εμβόλια, τα νέα εμβόλια, γιατί θα βγουν τόσο γρήγορα, μήπως είναι επικίνδυνα. Αυτά και άλλα πολλά ρωτούσαν και ερευνούσαν ειδικοί και μη ειδικοί. Οι επιστήμονες όμως θέλουν χρόνο. Δεν μιλούν με υποθέσεις παρά μόνο με τα δεδομένα που έχουν συλλέξει μέχρι εκείνη τη στιγμή που τοποθετούνται. Ωστόσο, δεν έλειψαν και τα αντιφατικά μηνύματα. Ήταν λοιπόν και μια μάχη με το χρόνο για να γνωρίσουμε το νέο ιό. Αυτή την κατάσταση εκμεταλλεύτηκαν οργανωμένα συμφέροντα και βέβαια ακτιβιστές του φόβου, της άρνησης και της παραποίησης επιστημονικών δεδομένων. Έτσι, ξεκίνησε ένα τσουνάμι παραπληροφόρησης που είχε 3 βασικούς άξονες. 1. Η νόσος δεν είναι επικίνδυνη. 2. Τα εμβόλια είναι επικίνδυνα. Και 3. Μην εμπιστεύεστε τους γιατρούς και γενικά τους επιστήμονες. Πολύ σύντομα η κρίση της πανδημίας έγινε κρίση παραπληροφόρησης. Τα πραγματικά γεγονότα πέρασαν σε δεύτερη μοίρα και η γραμμή μεταξύ άποψης και είδησης θόλωσε, θα λέγαμε. Η μισή αλήθεια μπλέχτηκε με τις ανακρίβειες και το ψέμα. Η έκταση του φαινομένου ήταν τεράστια, τόσο που οι πολίτες δυσκολεύονταν να βρουν αξιόπιστες πηγές ενημέρωσης. Αλλά και όταν τις έβρισκαν, αυτές οι πηγές είχαν υποστεί μεγάλο πόλεμο φθοράς με κύρια επιχειρήματα ότι εξυπηρετούν συμφέροντα ή ότι έχουν κομματική ατζέντα. Ο Παγκόσμιος Οργανισμός Υγείας αναγκάστηκε να μιλήσει τότε για infodemic και ο πρόεδρος του ζήτησε τη βοήθεια των ομάδων ελέγχου γεγονότων. Αυτές οι ομάδες είχαν να αντιμετωπίσουν κάτι πρωτόγνωρο. Η διασπορά των ψευδών μηνυμάτων ήταν ταχύτατη και το εύρος των ψευδών ισχυρισμών τεράστιος. Θα μπορούσε να περιγραφεί ως λερναία ύδρα. Την ώρα που εμείς ασχολούμασταν να καταρρύψουμε έναν ισχυρισμό, την ίδια στιγμή δημιουργούνταν δεκάδες στα μέσα κοινωνικής δικτύωσης. Με ταυτόχρονη αύξηση των πηγών βέβαια και από όπου εκπορεύονταν τα fake news. Το κακό που προκάλεσαν είναι ανυπολόγιστο. Μετριέται σε ανθρώπινες ζωές. Έχουμε πια μαρτυρίες ανθρώπων που κατάφεραν να ζήσουν αφού πέρασαν τον εφιάλτη στις μονάδες εντατικής θεραπείας, που ομολογούν ότι έπεσαν θύματα των πηγών παραπληροφόρησης που διακινούσαν εξωφρενικές θεωρίες, όπως ότι δεν υπάρχει πανδημία, ότι οι μάσκες βλάπτουν και ότι τα εμβόλια σκοτώνουν. Για να κατανοήσουμε τι ακριβώς έκαναν, και κάνουν βέβαια, αυτά τα κέντρα παραπληροφόρησης, θα προσπαθήσω να το δώσω με μια μεταφορά. Φανταστείτε μια γέφυρα σε μεγάλο ύψος πάνω από τη γη. Σε αυτή τη γέφυρα, οι πολίτες που επιθυμούν θέλουν να κάνουν το λεγόμενο bungee jumping. Ξέρουν ότι πρέπει να προετοιμαστούν κατάλληλα από τον υπεύθυνο, να δοθούν προσεκτικά με το σκηνή, να μπουν οι απαραίτητες δικλείδες ασφαλείας και ούτω καθεξής. Και ξαφνικά ο υπεύθυνος τους ανακοινώνει ότι σε αυτή τη γέφυρα έχουν πάψει να ισχύουν οι φυσικοί νόμοι. Δεν χρειάζεται κανένα μέτρο προστασίας. Είναι περιττό να δεθούν, είναι ανόητο να φοβούνται. Θα πετάξουν στην αρχή σαν πουλιά και θα πέσουν απαλά στο έδαφος. Επιστρατεύει παράλογα επιχειρήματα, ωστόσο πιστικά, βάζοντας και άλλους να τον επιδοκιμάζουν. Και βέβαια, πολλοί πείθονται και πηδούν. Αυτό περίπου κάνουν οι διακινητές παραπληροφόρησης αναφορικά με την νόσο και το ιό. Στέλνουν ανθρώπους στα νοσοκομεία και στο θάνατο. Και εδώ παρακαλώ την προσοχή σας. Πώς αμήνεται η ελληνική πολιτεία απέναντι στους διακινητές αυτών των εξωφρενικών θεωριών? Απάντηση. Δεν αμήνεται. Δεν έχει όπλα. Το άρθρο του ποινικού κώδικα που αφορά τη διασπορά ψευδών ειδήσεων δεν αναφέρει τη δημόσια υγεία. Σύμφωνα με το άρθρο 191 παράγραφος 1 περί διασποράς ψευδών ειδήσεων, τιμωρείται με φυλάκιση έως 3 έτη ή χρηματική ποινή όποιος προκαλεί ζημία στην οικονομία, στον τουρισμό, στην αμυντική ικανότητα της χώρας ή στη διατάραξη των διεθνών σχέσεών της. Σε μια χώρα με 11.000 νεκρούς απουσιάζει ζημία στη δημόσια υγεία από τη διασπορά ψευδών ειδήσεων. Ο διδάκτορ του ποινικού δικαίου Αθανάσιος Αναγνωστόπουλος αναφέρει σε πρόσφατο άρθρο του: Η απουσία της δημόσιας υγείας από τον κατάλογο έχει κάνει πολύ αισθητή την παρουσία της στην εποχή της πανδημίας. Πράγματι, δύσκολα μπορεί κανείς να συμφωνήσει ότι η δημόσια υγεία αποτελεί ένομο αγαθό κατώτερης σημασίας από τον τουρισμό, ώστε να δικαιολογείται αυτή η παράληψη. Και βέβαια δεν είναι ο μόνος νομικός που έχει αναδείξει αυτό το ζήτημα και ζητάει να συμπληρωθεί ο νόμος. Κοντολογήσει και με απλά λόγια. Ο υπεύθυνος στη γέφυρα στέλνει κόσμο στο θάνατο, αλλά δεν τιμωρείται. Κλείνω με 3 χαρακτηριστικές περιπτώσεις. Γιατρός από την Κρήτη, με μεγάλο ακροατήριο στα μέσα κοινωνικής δικτύωσης, διασπείρει εξωφρενικές θεωρίες με αποκορύφωμα ότι οι ανεμβολίαστοι θα ζήσουν, οι εμβολιασμένοι είτε θα αλλάξει το DNA τους, είτε θα βγάλουν λέπια, είτε θα πεθάνουν. Άλλο. Φοιτητής παρουσιάζεται ως ειδικός επιστήμονας στα μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης και αρνείται πανδημία, μάσκες, εμβόλια. Και τέλος, δικηγόρος με πάνω από 20.000 ακολούθους ισχυρίζεται εδώ και μήνες ότι υπάρχει οργανωμένο σχέδιο θανάτωσης του πληθυσμού στις μονάδες εντατικής θεραπείας και μάλιστα πείθει τους συγγενείς βαριά ασθενών να τους πάρουν από εκεί. Όλοι παραπάνω συνεχίζουν να διασπείρουν ανενόχλητη παραπληροφόρηση σχετικά με την πανδημία. Έχουν δυναμική παρουσία στα κοινωνικά δίκτυα και καλούνται ως ειδικοί να μιλήσουν σε τηλεόραση και ραδιόφωνο. Και τα 3 παραδείγματα που ανέφερα είναι μόνο ένα μικρό δείγμα. Κυρίες και κύριοι, κλείνω. Η κοινωνία έχει κουραστεί. Έχει κουραστεί ενδεχομένως και από εμάς όταν ανεβαίνουμε σε δημόσιο βήμα. Από όλους μας. Περάσαμε από την εποχή που η παραπληροφόρηση συνιστούσε απειλή για τη δημοκρατία. Εξακολουθεί βεβαίως να είναι. Και ανεβήκαμε επίπεδο. Οι ψευδείς ειδήσεις και η παραπληροφόρηση απειλούν πια την ίδια τη ζωή. Είναι ζήτημα ζωής. Πρέπει να δράσουμε. Πρέπει πολιτεία και θεσμοί να περάσουν στην επίθεση απέναντι στο φαινόμενο της παραπληροφόρησης. Ευχαριστώ θερμά.
Thank you, Dimitris. Our next speaker wrote recently something that actually is good food for thought for this discussion. She wrote, neither the tech platforms nor governments nor journalists can fact-check their way out of the crisis of truth and trust that Western democracy currently faces. So this suggests the need for a comprehensive strategy. Nina Jankowicz from Wilson Center, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I wish that I could be joining the Q&A as well, but unfortunately my connectivity prevented that. But I'm still thrilled to be addressing this esteemed audience. I've been on the front lines of the information war for the past 5 years, including as an advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. And really, that was where I first became aware that disinformation wasn't just a problem about silly memes online. It had a direct effect on people's lives. It had an effect on the way democracy functions. It had an effect on public safety. And as we've seen over the past year with the COVID-19 pandemic, it also has an effect on public health. In October, when I testified before the House of Representatives Committee on Intelligence, I told the members that disinformation was dismantling democracy. And I really got some pushback about that. There were some members who thought that that idea was far-fetched, but I think we saw on January 6th with the Capitol insurrection, all of that playing out in real time. And I believe the threat to our democracy only grows more exigent as we sit and decide not to act in terms of tech regulation, in terms of educating our populaces, and in terms of the tech solutions to disinformation, which I think you'll hear about a little bit from Mounir today on this panel, that we need to be pursuing. I wrote a book, which you can see over here, How to Lose the Information War, which explores how 5 Central and Eastern European governments addressed the threat of disinformation long before the United States or many Western governments even recognized that it was a problem. And one thing really comes through here. We need to work on really educating our populaces, investing in what I call citizens-based solutions to the disinformation problem. This isn't just about playing whack-a-troll and taking down offensive content, as you heard in the introduction. I don't believe that journalists or tech platforms can fact-check our way out of the crisis of truth and trust that we face today. But what we can do is equip people with the tools that they need to be a little bit savvy savvier about the information that they're consuming and what they're sharing. And that is not a panacea. I am under no illusion that it can change everything about the way that disinformation is flowing in today's information ecosystems. After all, these social media platforms incentivize people to share emotional content, to share incendiary content. But at least if we arm people with the idea that social media in a way is like junk food, some of them will take a little bit more care in the information they consume and the information that they amplify. But we also need regulatory solutions to this problem. And I believe there are more governments today examining regulation of social media platforms and of the media ecosystem than ever before, and for good reason. This is, again, something that is affecting our day-to-day lives. One thing that I just want to make sure that I underline here as a space that regulation could have an immense impact is the impact of disinformation on women, and in particular, women of color. At the Wilson Center, we just did some research examining 13 women candidates for public office, mostly in the United States, but also in New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and Canada. And what we found is that most women are encountering not only abuse and harassment, but gendered and sexualized disinformation when they just exist online, but especially those women who run for office and those who run for office as representatives of marginalized communities. And this is, again, where regulation can really come in handy. If we outlaw this type of abuse and harassment in politics and campaigning, and if the social media platforms also really invest in taking it down off of their platforms, because that's not free speech. You don't have a right to shout obscene things as you follow someone around on the sidewalk, and you also don't have the right to do that on the internet simply because they're a public figure. Along with, equipping law enforcement to actually to track down those that are sending these threats, because they do have an effect on women's daily lives and their physical well-being, their emotional well-being, and the safety of them and their families, then I think we can move toward a more equitable online discourse. And, this isn't something that is just a women's issue. This is what I'd like to end on today. It's something that affects women's participation in democracy. So again, the very act of engaging in democracy, of running for public office and engaging in public discourse, but it also affects our national security, because our adversaries, whether Russia, China, or Iran, or any other adversary you have out there, they're poking at the fissures in our society. And one of those fissures is misogyny, and the misogyny that women experience when they're in the public field, the public eye. And just like, we've seen Russia use racism in this regard, we've seen them use economic inequality, gun rights, you name it. All of these hot button issues have been favorite topics of the Russian government. They also use gender and sexuality in order to fuel disinformation. So just like I believe it's really important for us to invest in awareness building in the general population, I hope that you've learned something new today about how disinformation is being used against half of the population, especially women in public life. It is a dangerous act to exist on the internet while female and simply do your job. So if you see that, I hope that you'll all push back against it. And I hope you will bring this up with your governments and the representatives of tech platforms that you engage with. Thank you again for having me. I'm so sorry I can't join the Q&A. Have a wonderful conference.
Now let's go to Mounir, Vlad.
Mounir, it's a pleasure to have you here. I would also use something that you wrote recently in an article as an opening for your talk. You wrote, we should not focus solely on reactive countermeasures, penalizing propagators of false media and trying to detect forgeries after the fact. We need technologies that can help us prove what is true rather than detect what is fake. Interesting statement, and your work, both in diplomacy and technology, proves this point. So Mounir Ibrahim, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Truepic, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me virtually, of course, here in Greece. This is such an important topic and panel, and I'm honored to share the stage with my esteemed colleagues here. Indeed, what we've seen is an explosion of disinformation and fraudulent claims and fake news that has not only proliferated in the West or in the United States, but around the world. And what we have also seen is that so much of disinformation is often fueled by images and videos, visceral, tangible images that help provoke emotion and increase the perceived truth of an inaccurate statement or claim. And this is exactly the work that Truepic is aiming to tackle. I first saw this problem back as a US diplomat for nearly a decade, working on a variety of conflict areas in the Middle East and elsewhere. And one of my postings was actually at the United Nations in the UN Security Council. And what we would regularly see were images and videos from conflict zones, from non-permissive areas that would proliferate and become subject of discussion of the world's foremost international body on international peace and stability. And we would see images and videos coming from conflict zones that might show an atrocity or violence or the alleged actions. And because of the existence of social media, these images and videos would travel around the world so incredibly fast that before nation states, multilateral bodies like the UN, had time to really assess the validity or the authenticity of these images and videos, there would be immediate action and debate. And what we then also saw was this created a phenomenon where bad actors, countries that wanted to deny reality in any given place or location, they simply question the authenticity and the veracity of an image or video to undermine the actual events that were going on. And this is a highly, highly effective tool of disinformation. It was later coined by experts like Danielle Citron and Robert Chesney as the liar's dividend. And what this means is that if something can feasibly be fake, that means everything is fake. And this is a very, very dangerous phenomenon. And that is the reason, Vladimir, we chose to really try and use proactive technologies to prove things are authentic from the moment they are captured, to create an ecosystem in which verified and authenticated media can thrive online. Because what we're seeing around the world is a crisis in trust in what we see and hear online. And at the same time, we are seeing increased usage of the internet for trust transactions. If you think very simply, there's over 1.2 trillion digital images captured every year, the majority of which are coming from cell phones or smartphones of everyday people across the world. We are seeing increased use of the internet for personal trust transactions, everything from online dating to purchases to governmental decision-making. So what we need is a trust mechanism to help regulate and provide information to decision makers in all of these different scenarios. What Truepic does is we pioneered and we work with some of the largest technology companies in the world on a process called provenance media or controlled capture. And the idea is that by authenticating digital content as it's being created and cryptographically sealing the information attached with an image or a video or any piece of electronic digital content as it travels through the internet to platforms, OEMs, websites that adopt this technology, everyday people that are viewing an image or a video online will be able to see the provenance of that image or video, when it was created, by whom it was created, the date, the time, the location it was created, and if there have been any changes to that image or video as it's being created. This would be available totally opt-in, only if I were creating content and I wanted to attribute my information to it to provide trust. Now we can envision an ecosystem where when you are looking on Facebook or you are looking on Twitter or you are buying something online, when you see an image or a video, you will be able to see the provenance associated with that image and video. And that is that trusted ecosystem that we believe will become the future of trust in what we see and hear online in a disinformation world with the rise of synthetic media and deepfakes that is going to further erode the trust in what we see and hear online. So I'll stop there, but I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mounir, for your insightful comments. And now I will pass the floor to Professor Christos Frangonikolopoulos. Christos Frangonikolopoulos, the floor is yours. Please unmute. Please unmute.
Okay, I am going to talk to you about a different aspect altogether, about disinformation and narratives during the pandemic. We have seen, for example, that China and Russia are seem to be giving the European Union a few lessons in soft power and in narrative storytelling. Because the European Union members, in some countries have been turning to Beijing and Moscow for additional supplies of vaccines. They are faced with discontent, the slowness of the supplies and so on. So China and Russia have taken advantage of this, and their deliveries come, if you wish, with soft power messages, deployed actually to serve in practice the purpose of distracting the European citizens or their own citizens from their failures or disasters on numerous other issues, that are covered by the so-called soft power formula, as human rights, for example. So China is not only providing the vaccine free to its own people, but also to 53 countries around the world. And of course, in doing that, it's seeking to counter critical views, especially the harsh treatment of citizens in Hong Kong, in Xinjiang. Okay, it brings forward its economic success, scientific and medical achievements, and so on. Russia does the same thing. It wants to highlight Russian support for countries covered by the EU's enlargement and neighborhood policies. Russia also wants to convey the impression that it is medical science, that her medical science is prevailing over the West, despite the fact that a very few people have been vaccinated in Russia. And the name of the vaccine, Sputnik, mirrors that of the world's, if you remember, first artificial satellite launched by the Soviet Union in 1957. Russia rushed to become one of the first country to announce that its vaccine against COVID was approved, and so on. It wants to legitimize the vaccine. It wants to suggest that this is not a product of Putin's political system, Putin's oligarchy, but the successor of Soviet science and academic achievements. And today, don't forget that Sputnik is the only vaccine with its own with its own social media account. At the same time, Russia and China are also in parallel spreading disinformation. There is a report of the Atlantic Council on February 14th this year. Russia has echoed China's false claims about COVID originating as a US biological weapon or from other Western countries. And of course, China and Russia have also tried to discredit the U.S. vaccines, and they contribute to U.S. vaccine or British skepticism in the process. Okay, so now if you read the literature, you will see that these developments have linked vaccine to soft power, and this is what I want to say to contribute to the conversation today and say, no, this is wrong. This is not the case. If you detach from all the other political activities of these two countries, Russia and China, at home and abroad, the gain they might have in prestige at the moment, they may be, is ephemeral, because we all know that soft power derives from the attractiveness of a political, economic, and social model. Okay, and despite China's and Russia's success, if you wish, in vaccine diplomacy or in containing the pandemic domestically, few in Europe and very few in its eastern periphery will seek to emulate the Chinese or Russian model of society. That is something we should not forget. So I would like to say that if instead we consider soft power in a different light, if we consider it as a tool for understanding or connecting power in the traditional sense, military, economic, and geopolitical, in connecting power with influence, okay, then we have another perspective. And it is common for all regimes of all ideological persuasions to employ scientific and technological achievements, to gain international self-promotion. And fighting disease has, in fact, long been used as a means for extending soft power and winning friends through disinformation. If you go back in the mid to 20th century, you will see that the success of the smallpox eradication, for example, campaign, was filled by the rivalry between the Soviet Union and the United States. Or if you go back to 2002, you will see that responding to the SARS epidemic, China provided assistance and support to affected countries to bolster its global power status, even including Taiwan then. So the response to the virus has been embedded in the notion of global power, unfortunately, and diplomatic disputes from the very start of the pandemic. We should not forget that Trump referred to the Chinese virus, and in its own ambiguous way, Russia, China, and India as well have each taken advantage on the challenge to demonstrate that the benefits of their scientific progress can be felt or are felt by as many of the world's citizens as well as their own. The West, on the other hand, the European Union and the United States have sought to cast doubt on the credibility of the Chinese and Russian efforts. They present them as cynical ploys, for diplomatic advantage. Okay, they would argue you might be getting vaccines, but they are telling the world, but at what cost in your obligations to China and Russia? So unfortunately, and I will end with this, the prospect of global health becoming a new arena for global power competition and rivalry should worry all of us. And the global response to COVID so far has tended to be uncooperative and divisive. This explains a lot of the disinformation as well as a lot of fake news that the powers are investing on. We have a condition where each casts blame, or they are seeking to spread mistrust. And we should not forget that the complexities of global health or any other global problem and the needs of the billions excluded from the benefits of vaccine science and innovation demand a global response. So if whatever responding to COVID will lead to a more equal partnership for health for all, or it will reinforce some of the worst instincts, displayed by power politics, as we saw in the past year. That will determine not only the course of COVID-19, but also the impact of the next epidemic to threaten global health, and of course all the other global problems that will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And definitely COVID is such an amazing example, case study for looking at disinformation. And my question actually is a little bit broader. It's more or less about the strategies rather than one method or another. So there are certain premises here. So the fact that disinformation is not new and is also here to stay. Extremely harmful, as you said, to democracy, to science. Technologies of disinformation are getting better and better and better. So the question is, at the end of the day, it's about, people applying critical thinking and common sense. What elements of strategies do you see are important? Since we are at this forum that actually is looking at the broad picture, the big picture. What strategy do you think might be working, handling comprehensively this issue that is here to stay, as I said? So maybe we should start with Mounir and go quickly because time is short to the other members of the panel.
No, thank you. Excellent question, Vladimir. And we often say it's a whole of society approach. We as technologists recognize that technologists cannot solve this problem. We also don't believe that simply legislators can solve this problem. What needs to happen is that legislators, academics, technologists, behavioral psychologists, and an entire array of individuals that have a say, that have unique understanding of how disinformation permeates and how cognitive dissonance really takes over, should come together and actually produce standards to be implemented. I do believe technologists can help provide tools to give decision makers, as they make decisions based off of what they see and hear online, the most accurate and transparent information possible. But at the end of the day, there are many other aspects, as my colleague stated, to this problem. Over.
Definitely. Christos, anything else that government, society should do in order to fix this?
Thank you for the question. Listen, I have my doubts. I don't see how governments can really fix this, and I don't see how technological giants can fix this, like Facebook. I think that this can only be fixed by citizens. If citizens devote more time to read and do research, of course, you will say this is difficult today, but we have to convince them that a new realism is possible, and a new realism means that you have to start reading, you have to start researching, And another thing that I think should be done, because we often tend to blame the technological giants for this, and the fact that they want to make profit. Okay, of course, that is a very valid point. But at the same time, governments around the world are not providing enough space and room to citizens to discuss this issue. They are dealing with most of the issues on their own. So you have this great divide between those who know and those who don't know. And those who don't know are feel excluded, And when one crisis follows the other, like it has been happening in the last 15 years, what increases the disconnection of citizens from politics, from global organizations, and of course it provides a very fertile ground for disinformation and fake news. I think that governments should not be afraid to get their citizens involved in discussion. You need to have a discussion, information, counter-information, counter-argumentation. It's very important.
Definitely, and also social networks do a lot of good. That means look at Belarus, look at Myanmar these days, where they give a voice to the citizens. So it's not only their contribution to amplifying this information is also their contribution to amplify citizen participation. So I don't know how are you on time, Nikos. If Dimitris maybe could say a few words, or do you have any other question?
Αυτό που ήθελα να πω είναι ότι θίγεται αυτό το θέμα, είναι το Άγιο Δισκοπότηρο όλων των ανθρώπων της επικοινωνίας που ασχολούνται με την παραπληροφόρηση, που ασχολούνται με το πρόβλημα το μεγάλο αυτό. Είναι σύνθετο. Δεν λύνεται εύκολα. Είναι το ζητούμενο και η συζήτηση που γίνεται σε εξέλιξη σε όλο τον πλανήτη αυτή τη στιγμή. Πώς θα καταπολεμήσουμε την παραπληροφόρηση. Στο σημείο αυτό πρέπει να τονίσουμε ένα θέμα που έχει παρεξηγηθεί. Η αλήθεια είναι υπερτιμημένη ως έννοια. Νομίζουμε ότι ο κόσμος, επειδή το λέει και το εκφράζει προς τα έξω, θέλει την αλήθεια. Δεν είναι έτσι. Όταν έρχεται αυτό που ο κόσμος λέει αλήθεια αντιμέτωπη με τις πεποιθήσεις του, ο κόσμος δεν θέλει αυτή την αλήθεια. Επιλέγει μια αλήθεια που βολεύει τις πεποιθήσεις, τις ιδεολειψίες, τα συναισθήματά του, την πολιτική, κομματική, θρησκευτική, κοινωνική τοποθέτηση. Είναι ένα πολύ δύσκολο ζήτημα. Βέβαια εδώ η επιστήμη πρέπει να βοηθηθεί και από μόνη της και από εμάς. Και σίγουρα πρέπει να αλλάξει τον τρόπο που επικοινωνεί πια. Τελείωσε νομίζω η εποχή που ο επιστήμονας, ο γιατρός, ο καθηγητής μιλούσε από την έδρα με το χέρι ψωμένο, έλεγε αυτό που είχε να πει και έφευγε. Πρέπει να κατέβει χαμηλά, να μιλήσει σε απλή γλώσσα με τον πολίτη, να άρει τις φοβίες του, να προσπαθήσει να τον ηρεμήσει και βέβαια σε καμία περίπτωση να μην τον αποδομήσει, και αυτό αφορά και εμάς τους λεγόμενους που ξέρουμε την αλήθεια, να μην αποδομούμε τους ανθρώπους αυτούς. Είναι φοβισμένοι. Το κίνημα των συνωμοσιολόγων, των αντιεμβολιαστών, όλοι αυτοί που πάνε κόντρα σε αυτό που λέμε επιστήμη, είναι πίσω από αυτούς βρίσκεται ένας φόβος, μια ανασφάλεια, μια δυσπιστία στο σύστημα. Δεν μπορούμε να τους πείσουμε όλους. Αυτό είναι σαφές. Μπορούμε όμως κάποιους ανθρώπους να τους βοηθήσουμε να μην πάθουν αυτό που είπα πριν, να μην περάσουν από την περιπέτεια ενός νοσοκομείου. Είναι δύσκολο το πρόβλημα.
Thank you, Dimitris. And now, as we are actually reaching the end of our panel, I would like to ask to all of you, what about the future? What do you think that the future trends will be in that area regarding this information? Mounir, let's start with Mounir, and then move to
It's an excellent question, and it's almost difficult to predict, as we've seen how much the world has changed in the last 4 years. But I do believe when it comes to online content, there will need to become mathematical and provable trust mechanisms to help close the trust gap in what we see and hear online. I also do believe that there will have to be some forums or spaces, as have been said earlier, that governments help provide to bring together the different parties to help educate people on what is truthful content and how to seek out truthful content. Those are the two trends that I envision, with the caveat that we are going to see technology getting faster and better and more fraudulent in the years to come as well. Over.
Thank you, Mounir. Now, Christos, what do you think the current trends will be on that topic? Taking into account, actually, what have happened in the US. We have seen a cyber attack through a major gas pipeline that it actually highlights the dangers that are on the line. Christos?
Yes, that is true. That is a fact. I cannot predict, as Mounir has said, but I am confident.
But we are at the Delphi forum. That's why you need to predict, to give predictions.
Yes, I'll make a different kind of prediction. And my kind of prediction is based on a report I read from the LSE 2 days ago on how civil society is coming together to demand discussion and change of direction of the European Union. And I am saying that because in civil society you have two dimensions. You have the official NGO dimension, which already discusses with governments and political systems, and you have the unofficial, informal, radical civil society, which is not willing to discuss with governments. But now, and given that the European Union has opened the floor through the conference for the future of Europe that will last for a year, they are more than happy, these informal forces, to come together and sit on the table and discuss. I think that is a very positive development. If you go back 10 years ago, during the debt crisis, those informal elements of civil society were not only Eurosceptic, but Euro rejectionists. Now they are in favor of Europe. You have a new kind of insurgency, in other words, that might lead to the change of debate, to the presentation of facts and discussion on social media, and I hope so,
Thank you, Christos. Dimitris, the final word to you.
Πρέπει να ξεκινήσουμε, καταρχάς να δεχθούμε, να κατανοήσουμε ότι δεν βρισκόμαστε στη μέση του φαινομένου, ούτε βέβαια στο τέλος. Η προσωπική μου εκτίμηση είναι ότι βρισκόμαστε στην αρχή. Ως εκ τούτου δεν μπορώ να είμαι αισιόδοξος αναφορικά με πρόβλεψη και με αυτό που μένει να δούμε. Εκείνο που παρατηρούμε εμείς στην πράξη, βλέποντας τα δεδομένα και ανοίγοντας τις σελίδες, το βαθύ Facebook, όπως λέμε, ή το βαθύ ίντερνετ, βλέπουμε να διασπείρεται η παραπληροφόρηση χωρίς σταματημό. Δεν υπάρχει μέχρι αυτή τη στιγμή, και βέβαια υπάρχει το πρόγραμμα ή τα προγράμματα που τρέχουν διεθνώς από τις πλατφόρμες. Δεν μπορούν όμως, δεν είναι αποτελεσματικά. Το περιορίζουν, αλλά όχι δραστικά. Και σκεφτείτε πως αυτό το πρόβλημα μεταλλάσσεται, διαδίδεται. Αυτό που είπα και στην αρχή. Κλείνουμε, αξιολογούμε μια ομάδα παραπληροφόρησης, βγαίνουν άλλες 10. Δεν νομίζω ότι η κοινωνία των πολιτών, όπως ακούγεται ωραία σαν λέξη, έχει τη δύναμη να ανακόψει αυτή την απειλή. Θέλει συνεργασία και θέληση, βούληση ισχυρή και άλλων φορέων και άλλων δυνάμεων, κρατικών, θεσμών, βέβαια πολιτών, ομάδων συγκροτημένων, της δικαιοσύνης, και να ισορροπήσει, και κλείνω, βέβαια, σε αυτό που λέμε ελευθερία της άποψης, που είναι ζητούμενο και το γνωρίζουμε και το θέλουμε όλοι, και βέβαια ασυδοσία της άποψης, αν θέλετε, σε εισαγωγικά, ή της τεκμηρίωσης μιας άποψης, που οδηγεί, όπως είπα και στην αρχή, στο κρεβάτι μιας εντατικής. Αυτό είναι για μένα το ζητούμενο. Θα περάσουμε δύσκολες εποχές.
Thank you, Dimitris. So a broader alliance it is needed in order to correspond to current and future challenges that actually are across all the scientific fields, as actually kind of alliance that we set up through this panel. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to organize a panel on a very important topic regarding fake news. I would like also to thank my co-moderator Vladimir Speser and our distinguished guests Christos, Mounir, Dimitris, and Nina. Vlad, the final word is yours.
Thank you very much. It's such an important topic, and the only hope I have is that we are going to continue this discussion, and many people, as Christos said a little bit earlier, civil society and all the rest will engage, because it is such an important challenge we have as democracies, as promoters of science, as human beings. So again, it has been a pleasure. Thank you to the forum, to the Delphi forum, for hosting this discussion. Hopefully, will continue in the years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.